Welcome everyone. I'm Claire Wedman. I'm very glad that you're all here today. I'm glad that I'm here today also. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Julian of Norwich, the song. And I thought this was important. This is from some songbooks. Julian is widely considered one of the greatest mystics of medieval times. She had a room in Norwich Cathedral which had one opening facing outward and for the people who streamed to her for solace and advice, and a second opening inward facing the sanctuary. Then another book said, this is, I think, very interesting too. She made a strong statement for the motherhood of God, As truly as God is our Father, so truly is God our Mother. Our Father wills, the Mother works, our good Lord, the Holy Spirit, confirms. The Mother's service is nearest, readiest and surest, nearest because it is most natural, readiest because it is most loving, and surer because it is truest. This song was written by Sidney Carter of England in Great Britain. Julian of Norwich. Loud are the bells of Norwich, and the people come and go. Here by the Tower of Julian I tell them what I know. Ring out bells of Norwich and let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know. Love like a yellow daffodil is coming through the snow. Love like a yellow daffodil is Lord of all I know. Ring out bells of Norwich and let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know. Ring for the yellow daffodil, the flower in the snow. Ring for the yellow daffodil and tell them what I know. Ring out bells of Norwich and let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know. All shall be well, I'm telling you, let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know. Loud are the bells of Norwich and the people come and go. Here by the Tower of Julian I tell them what I know. Ring out bells of Norwich and let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know. All shall be well, I'm telling you, let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know.
Good morning, friends. I'm Debbie Dickinson. Okay, I'll speak up closer and louder. Okay, they say hold it like an ice cream cone, and so I'll speak like that into it. I'm a neighbor of Jim's for many years in Fly Creek and part of the same Butternut's monthly Quaker meeting, and we're a much smaller meeting than when he began, but we've invited Quakers from around to come and join us here today. And I wanted to just say some of the things that we try to remember when we gather nowadays, to turn off our cell phones if we haven't done that. And I'm not sure I did mine. I've got to speak up. Okay. I have hearing aids, and I think I hear myself as so loud. This thing says, sorry, I don't understand. It's on, you do it. Thank you. Thank you very much. You all see exits that way and this way. The bathroom is right around the corner here on this side. We have so much joy at welcoming everyone here. I'm going to share with you, to start off with, part of what we sometimes do when someone in our own meeting goes on to the next part of eternity, which is to write what we call a minute, something of our own experience as a Quaker meeting, of who he was as we knew him in our worship and daily lives. So I'll do that now. A Quaker therapist who lived for years with a muscle wasting disease shared this message on a Christmas greeting. We are nothing, we have nothing, but ourselves to give. James Atwell, Jim, was certainly a gift to our Butternuts monthly meeting. He came to us having a deeply rooted faith, which led him to the Christian Brothers Teaching Order in Philadelphia. He always settled easily into our worship, adding something to the whole of those gathered in listening to that of the divine, God, or something beyond us, and to the spark within each of us. One time, on arriving late to the Cooperstown worship group, he described the experience as akin to sinking down into a country pool with those present. The experience of a vibrant community and commitment to service were part of what Jim brought with him to his home in Fly Creek, having left the brothers in '69 following the term of Pope John XXIII. He returned to Maryland, where he taught at a local community college. There, he met and married Gwen Vosburgh from Edmeston, New York, a fellow teacher. A remarkable, very full secular life also included his coming to know Quakers at the Annapolis Friends meeting. He moved to Fly Creek, New York in retirement as a widower, having nursed Gwen through her experience of terminal cancer in their too short time together. Profound loss was coupled with an eagerness to grow, to plant new roots. His love of people, curiosity, sense of humor, and twinkling eyes invited engagement. His life outside our meeting often was deeply connected to what happened in our worship. At a joint committee meeting of Ministry and Council and Advancement Committee, agendas were dropped as we met in a friend's home in silence. We were feeling the trauma of a recent shooting of an African-American teenager by a fellow student in Cooperstown. This led to connecting with others in the community, interfaith meetings in churches and secular venues, where deep listening and often difficult sharing occurred. The focus was on those directly involved, but also developing a community of care for all our children. Jim didn't lead the meetings, but was part of our grounding in spirit-led searching. Our deciding to record Jim in the ministry included an awareness that he certainly was ready to help others when many congregations needed help during illness or other reasons, and Jim could bring the Sunday message. At our own programmed Quaker meeting in Unadilla, Jim and his faithful dog Blue were often at the pulpit for many months. In his Otsego County Jail ministry, having the designation of recorded minister meant more confidential counseling would be available to those who were incarcerated. Jim had a particular gift of bringing the humanity of Jesus to light. As he spoke with those gathered with our friends visiting the Quaker worship group in Sullivan Correctional Facility, it seemed we all felt the humanity present in this man from Galilee. And the Quaker belief that we all have a portion of the divine or that of God within us seemed to light a lot of faces. Jim was no saint, slightly irreverent perhaps, but he allowed himself to be used by Spirit. Jim's words, action, and presence in our lives helped all who knew him feel the we of belonging to the human family. His responsiveness to that of the divine in everyone helped in many situations dealing with us and them, where the transformative power of love helped many let go of attachment to us and them identities. As a participant in the Parkinson's group, he modeled the gift of picking ourselves up after stumbling and offering a tender hand to another, learning to ask for help as well as to receive. Such takes practice. Reciprocity is part of our natural world, and we are in the process of learning more about that. His eyes and smile spoke volumes over the years as his voice diminished due to Parkinson's. Our meeting had several opportunities to celebrate birthdays with Jim. Last year, we connected with many others in the community to join in celebrating him while he was still here with us. What a joy to gather on his 86th birthday at Fly Creek Historical Society's home at the Grange Hall, honoring as well his second wife, Ann Atwell, who had died during COVID in July 2020. We were able to listen in on many conversations and testimonials as friends from all over, including a former student of his from Ann Arundel College in Maryland. The mayor of Cooperstown read the official proclamation of Atwell Day. He was a master storyteller. A visiting British Quaker once told us a parable with the ending. It's as we hear one another's stories that we learn God's story. That feels true, and we know the stories will continue, and we will continue to feel his presence in our lives. And now I'd like to introduce our friend from Schenectady, Anita Paul. She was special in being Jim's arch visitor, which was a special program that she and another Quaker initiated in Quakerdom. And maybe I should let you say something about that if you want to, and then you can explain kind of what a Quaker worship for Memorial is.
Probably most of you have never been in the company of so many Quakers. Welcome. It is right and just that we come together, because it is in community that we all honor those major events in our lives. The births, graduations, weddings, and death. We come together to share the stories and the memories and to lean on each other and maybe cry some tears and share some laughs. I know that's going to happen. Deb referred to the ARCH program, Aging Resources, Consultation and Help. And I would come down here to Cooperstown and meet with Ann and Jim over a period of time just to talk things through. A Quaker meeting for worship is an opportunity to settle into the silence and draw closer to the sacred. After a period of waiting worship, people here will stand and wait for the microphone to come and share some memory, some joy, some story about their relationship with Jim. We will break that period in the middle and we will all sing the hymn that's on page 340 in your hymnal. And then we will again sink into the holy silence, giving all of us the opportunity to share the Jim we knew.
Thank you. I'd like to start out by saying my wife and I got in the hugest fight with me wearing these overalls today. You can't believe it. It's lucky she's even here. Thank you for coming, honey. But I did it as a tribute to our gentleman farmer, okay? I don't know, you know, Jim was proud of many things, but him and Ann was so proud of being gentleman farmers, and everyone knows that, so. Let me say this, in a tapestry of life, there are threads of profound connection woven together by shared experiences and love. As we remember Jim, let us honor not only the man, but also the glorified spirit that lives on in each of our hearts. Jim was a true artisan of relationships, wearing many hats and grace and wisdom. He was a friend, a mentor, a guiding light, and most importantly, a master in what he and I would refer to as the fine work of nurturing love and community. In his presence, we felt the warmth and companionship and the strength of unity. Every moment spent with him was a reminder of the beauty that exists when souls intertwine in purpose and affection. I was fortunate enough to witness the profound impact he had on everyone around him. The evening before his passing holds a very special place in my heart, a bittersweet memory shared with Kristen and Doug and myself as we gathered close, feeling the weight of the moment. Jim's breathing grew labored, and silence enveloped the room, heavy with a deep sense of sorrow and loss. that we were facing. Yet, within the silence, a voice, a presence, nudged me to look again. What I initially saw as a moment of sorrow transformed into a revelation of radiant light. It was the very essence of Jim, his glorified spirit, shimmered with anticipation, brimming with excitement for the journey that was laying ahead. The notion that he was not merely fading, but rather preparing for a magnificent transition ignited a spark of joy in my heart. This was a birthing. In sharing this revelation with Kristen and Doug, we found ourselves united in a sense of joy and celebration that suffused the air around us. Jim had transformed our sorrow into something beautiful, reminding us that his love would continue to shine brightly in the hearts of everyone he touched. As we remembered this understanding, we celebrated not only his life, but the indelible mark he had left upon each of us. Our dear friend James may have departed from this realm, but the legacy of love he cultivated will endure. Let us carry on in a forward direction the fine work. He exemplified this, ensuring that our connections flourish and that love remains at the center of our lives. Together, we honor him by embracing the joy he inspired within us, nurturing our hearts and keeping his spirit alive through our own acts of kindness and connection. As I close, I will add this one important understanding that Jim and I both shared. There is no mystery as to the meaning of life. We all embark upon an embodiment within matter in order to serve one another, and not as a servant, but as a lover.
I was Jim's neurologist for many years. One of the blessings of being a physician is when your patient becomes your friend, and that happened between Jim and me. He asked me to write a little blurb for his book, Wobbling, Home, and I was honored to do that and to express how much he taught me about neurology and particular conditions. I'm most grateful to Jim for his officiating at the wedding of Christy and me back in 2007. It took. And we were honored to have him in our home. We're here in part to mourn the loss of Jim from our world, but really in our memories, he continues to enrich our world.
I'm Marion Carl, and I live at Woodside Hall. I came not prepared to make any talk, but I feel like I might give you another side of Jim, who you see as a saint. I also see him as the bad boy. Jim had many years of good health, but toward the end, he had several different maladies that carried him off to the emergency room several times while I was in his company. I should say that the seating at Woodside is not deliberate, but somehow I happened to be at his table, and we sort of stuck to the same table for each meal. And I would come down sometimes, "Where's Jim?" "Oh, he's sick and he's gone off." So I didn't realize really how sick he was. But I will share a couple of things that we enjoyed. I liked to put out feeding trays for birds out my window, or I saw his and envied, bad word, envied his, and he showed me how he managed to do that. It was interesting to sit with your nose to the window and have a bird almost 2 feet in front of you, eating their food that you have put out for them. Also at the table, we happened to sit together with 4 people around the table in the cafeteria, or the dining room, I should say. And by that time, he was on a very, very liquid diet to facilitate his swallowing. It was sort of tasteless, I would guess. And he would look around at other people's food and try to sneak a piece from their platter until somebody stopped him, and then he would whack at them to try to get it back. What else do I remember about him? I just enjoyed his presence and miss him so much, and wanted to share these few points about him. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tom Heitz, for those who may not know me. I knew Jim first as a member of the Cooperstown Rotary Club. I'm not here to speak for the Rotary Club. However, Jim was a faithful attendant in the Rotary Club and enriched many of our meetings with his sometimes very funny comments on life in Rotary and elsewhere, and his contributions to the club. And I will always remember him when he went to Woodside Hall. In his early days there, he invited me to come and visit, and I would bring some readings, things that I had written or other things I thought he might be interested in. He was a very attentive listener. We would always have a wonderful conversation. I asked him if he was having any problems adjusting to life at Woodside. No, he said, it's wonderful to me. However, he said, I do have one problem. When I go to sleep at night, we do not lock the doors here because of the fire, possibility of fire. We don't want any doors locked in our rooms. And there is a woman that comes and joins me in the middle of the night. And I don't know who she is. But it's very hard to sleep in this bed with another person. But I make her as welcome as I possibly can. And eventually someone comes and gets her and takes her back to her own room. I'm hoping that person isn't here today. I better stop now.
Bless your heart, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Rigby. I have no business speaking, but I'm going to anyway. I just wanted to say, as someone who studies Scripture, I've always appreciated Jim's perspective and his wealth of knowledge, and it's always been a joy. And one of the things that we have both had an issue with is the secondhand interpretations of the Scriptures. They're not written, they're written by people after the fact, sort of thing. And one thing that I really celebrate with Jim's life is the fact that we have first person writings from him. If you don't have his books, find a way to get them, whether they're the joyful stories from Fly Creek or his tenuous walkings of Wobbling home as his spirit grew more and more, to his enigmatic book of Jesus's Dog, which really is, I invite, as we miss him, let's go back to his books and let's celebrate his life once again from his first person perspective that will still lead us joy and insight.
Hi, my name is Tim Wiles, and that is a perfect comment to follow up on. I didn't prepare any remarks either, but the door has been opened by other people's remarks, particularly yours, Kathy. Jim was a mentor to me, a father figure to me, a great friend to me, and of course married me and my wife, Marie. And so we are, Jim is very important to us. And I have a file folder at home and would invite anyone to contact me if they're having trouble finding his columns, but you should be able to find them in the Nisha Library and perhaps even online. Several columns that I just want to mention very, very briefly. He wrote a column about an ancestor of his who fell down a well and was rescued. And at the end of that column, he talks about, I happened to see an article the other day where Henry Louis Gates Jr. was talking about the 35,000 or so ancestors that can be found if you start looking into Pope Leo's or anyone's background, 34,000 people, and more. That's just as far back as we go. And Jim's column ended with a reflection about how incredibly rare and statistically unlikely it is that any of us is here right now, based on all the wells fallen down, all the wars fought, etc. So that really stuck with me. Another day he was sitting in a shed on his farm, and he was watching a spider during the daytime, hunting, if you will, if that's the right term. And he used a phrase that I think is, everything was about theology with Jim. And he described this spider as neutral as a god. And I thought, what wisdom we have among us here in Cooperstown. One column I think you all would enjoy rereading is that one night, one year, he decided to sit in that same shed on Christmas Eve and commune with his animals. And that's one of the most beautiful pieces of writing I think anyone's ever written. I do want to share that I commuted from Cooperstown to Guilderland, where we live now, for 4 years, and it occurred to me that I could do books on CD. So I started doing these big, long books that I had never been able to finish before. And eventually I decided to listen to James Earl Jones read the entire Bible. And when I told Jim about this, he said, well, we're going to have to get together every 2 weeks to talk about what you've heard. And so he was a natural teacher and added so much more meaning to me with that Bible than I would have gotten on my own. And then I want to tell a quick story that he told me, and I don't think he ever wrote about it. But apparently there's a monthly or periodic meeting of all the clergy in Otsego County, and perhaps some surrounding counties. And there are many, many different varieties of religion. And I thought it was really cool and beautiful that all of these clergy from, including non-Christian perspectives, Eastern perspectives, etc., would get together. And I was always a little envious when he told me about it, because I'm not a clergy member, but I thought, boy, there's quite a bit to learn there. I also don't know the dates, but around 20-ish years ago, New York State began discussing the possibility of gays and lesbians getting married. And it took a while for that to get passed. But when it was first being discussed, I went to lunch with Jim shortly after one of these clergy meetings. And he described a very raucous meeting with a lot of disagreement at which anti-voices dominated. And one particular minister seemed to end the discussion by saying, I don't care what any of the rest of you say, this is surely the devil in our midst. And then silence hung, perhaps in a different way than it hangs in a Quaker meeting. And Jim said, or maybe the Holy Spirit.
Thank you. Since we're following up on the speakers just before us, I'm Nancy New, and I'm from the Oneonta Christian Science Society, and I wanted to thank those who know Jim for being here today and honoring him. We were blessed to hold our services at the First United Presbyterian Church, the Red Door Church, across from Friendly's, in Oneonta for 6 or 7 years, and we met right down the hall from the lovely Quaker meeting. And what was real special was that we were all very ecumenical in our outreach to so many different people, and we just loved being there together. The host church met from 10 until 11. Our church met from 10:30 to 11:30, and the Quakers met from 11 to 12. Jim would frequently come and sit in our meeting listening to our lesson sermon and nodding, pondering, listening to what we like to think of as angel messages from God. And he commented how he loved to go down to his group and sit in silence and gratitude and just ponder those ideas from the Bible. I also was very privileged to be part of the interfaith Thanksgiving services that happened regularly. And if there was anyone who saw good in every person that he met, it was Jim. As I was thinking about him this morning, I came across a verse from Romans that I thought was pretty accurate. Be kindly affectioned one to another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another. Be of the same mind one toward another, and as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. And I think Jim set a wonderful example for all of us. And as we keep him and what he taught us of life and love in our hearts, in our daily lives, in our joyful greeting of everyone we meet, he's still walking with us, and we can be so grateful. So let gratitude and love abide in each of our hearts each day of all the years. Thank you, Jim, for teaching us.
I would just like to give a bit of credit to the youth ministry that is happening in the back of the church. I just want to let Gabe know that his applause is perfectly timed.
I'm Annie Bancroft. During the 25 years I was living in Cooperstown and was a part of the Butternuts meeting, I worked on a committee with Jim and Deb and others, and also we shared rides by car between Cooperstown and Oneonta. Now, people talk about his books, and they show how great he was with words. We used to sometimes be talking about words as we rode along. And I remember one time I asked him, what is the anti-macassar against? Those little lace things that people put on the back of chairs and sometimes on the arms. And it turned out it was against something that I had not known about. He told me quite a bit about something called macassar oil that apparently at one time was on folks' hair. So that could really mess up one of those upholstered chairs or sofas or something. Later, on another journey, I had just been hearing something from, I guess it's My Fair Lady, about somebody waiting at the church and they were left in the lurch. So I wanted to know where the lurch was located. Jim could not find the answer to that.
I think it's interesting. We had thought maybe so many folks weren't quite used to a silent meeting, and it would be good to put a hymn in the middle so we could all stand up. And maybe we'll just do one verse of the hymn together, but this was called in our meeting the Quaker hymn, but founders of the Quaker meeting with us had page 340. This is my song. But we can do two verses and then we can continue. Okay, thank you.
deacon in the Roman Catholic Church. And Connie and I moved up here, I guess, 20 years ago, a little bit longer. And my pastor here at the time loved to delegate things to me that he didn't particularly want to do. And that's what deacons do. We take care of the widows and the orphans, we say. And on this particular occasion, there was an ecumenical prayer ministry that was going to take place at Cooper Park. And I believe it was Memorial Day. And so the pastor naturally delegated that to me. And as I arrived, I was early, I guess, because being a rookie, I didn't know my way around too well. And as I got there, there was a gentleman sitting on a bench, and all by himself. And I walked up to him, and he greeted me and introduced himself. And he says, "I'm Jim Atwell." And I said, "Well, I'm Randy Velez. Nice to meet you." And we started to make connections. There was no one else around. And it typified my relationship with him for the entire 20 years that we've lived here, that it was purely personal. We participated in various ecumenical services, and of course, we knew each other as a result of that. But what really made it special was the fact that when I sat down with him, he wanted to know about me. And it turns out we had a lot in common. I mean, he was a member of an established religious order in the Roman Catholic Church, and I'm an ordained deacon. And so we started from there. Now, it was a quantum leap, in my opinion, at that time, to go from that to a Quaker meeting. But he apparently accomplished it, and he did it very well. What made it especially important to me was that every time I saw him, from then until Woodside Hall, I'd visit him there, and our paths would cross every once in a while in other events and so on. It was always a very intimate relationship. He always wanted to know what I was doing, and we're actually of the same vintage, and so we could also reminisce very well about the old days, and whatever it was never. It never felt directed. It was always a common discussion. It was him and me alone, seated somewhere, and just chatting. And it never appeared to be more than that. But every time we finished, and I would leave, and he was always very happy and all of that. But when I would leave, I felt different. I felt different. It was nothing that he did or said specifically, but being in the presence of this man had an enormous impact on me over the past 20 years. And even though we never really participated that much in public in various things, our relationship got stronger as we went along. And we had common people that we knew and we could talk about. And I have a friend who says that there are only 500 Christians in the whole world and we just go around bumping into each other. And I think that's the way it was with him, because if I mentioned a name, he would say, "Oh yeah, I know him," or "I know her." "Oh yeah, sure." Anyway, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I want to express the fact that as much as he had a public image, which was beautiful, there was a private man who was willing to give of himself to anybody one-on-one.
My name's Catherine Raditz, and as Tim Weil said, Jim just had a wonderful gift of writing, and he wrote a column which was very special. I shared a letter with him in December of 2001 that my sister-in-law received from a fireman 3 days after 9/11. This fireman was
pushed down into a hole, and he grabbed some things. And one of the things he grabbed was my brother's card. And Jim interviewed the fireman, and he wrote such a wonderful column, which was a great comfort to our family.
My name is Bill Dean. I'm not as good a speaker as the other people we've heard, but back in 1989, I was one of 55 charter members of the Fly Creek Area Historical Society. And one of the other members, as I looked down the list, was this gentleman from Maryland named James S. Atwell. I wondered why somebody from Maryland would join the Fly Creek Area Historical Society. Well, Jim, of course, moved to this area, I think, around 1993, and he quickly became a very active member of our society. He helped me with the newsletter. In 1996, he became our president, and he was an excellent president. He ran well-paced and orderly meetings, and he spent 4 years in that capacity. He had a way of getting things done. He was instrumental in our getting our building, which we still have, the former Fly Creek Grange, in our getting nonprofit status and tax-exempt status, things like that that we sometimes talked about but never knew how to get done, and somehow he would get those things done. And when we finally got our first book published 3 years ago, and he contributed several chapters to that book. And the day after I received it, I made a trip to Woodside Hall to give him a copy. But probably my favorite memory of Jim in connection with the Historical Society was a meeting in the 1990s where the person giving the program, it just turned out to be kind of a silly program. And Jim and I were in the very back of the building, just kind of making little wisecracks under our breaths to each other and trying to get each other to laugh. And here we were, he was in his 60s and I was in my, 40s. These grown men sitting in the back of the room like little school children, stifling giggles. So that's my memory of Jim.
My name is Francie Kuhn, and decades ago, my husband ran into Jim Atwell at a Habitat meeting, and not too soon afterwards, 25 years ago now, to be exact. Okay. 25 years ago, when my husband was declared terminal, an oft visit to the hospital where he was for the next 7 weeks was Jim Atwell. And my husband died of the same cancer as his first wife. Maybe that's why he kept coming, but probably not, because Jim would come anyway. For whatever reason, he didn't know us very well, but he was often there. And after he died, he wrote this beautiful article about my husband's last days, which became a family treasure to this day, of course. He put it in the local newspaper. He read it to Rotary. And he put it in his last book, Wobbling Home. And for this kind of memory, my family is forever grateful for his love, his friendship, and his kindness. He was a great man.
Hi. I guess I've known Jim longer than anybody here. I'm his niece, Ann Atwell. There aren't many family members left in Maryland. I'm pleased to see how many good friends he has here. My earliest memories of Jim are just full of love and fun. And as you can imagine, as a young man, he was full of energy and enthusiasm and great with kids. And I just want to say I'm very thankful for having him as my uncle and as a wonderful role model for myself and so many other people. Thank you so much.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Prudy Cheesebro Whitehead, married to Paul. I grew up in Edmeston, and I've known Jim, knew Jim, still know Jim for nearly 60 years. He came into my life because his first wife, Gwen Vosburgh, her father was the pastor in my parents' home church, the Second Baptist Church in Edmeston. We have a couple Edmeston people here. So her family lived there. They later then moved to South Carolina. But the Vosburghs and the Cheesebros had a wonderful and very close, enduring friendship. And Jim came into our life when I was a young girl, marrying Gwen, who was chairman of the business department at Ann Arundel Community College, where Jim, at a certain point, said he sought refuge after he left the Christian Brothers with $500 in a suit out onto the streets of Philadelphia. He said it was much like getting sprung from jail, among other things. But as a young girl growing up, he became very much a part of our family. He was Jimmy Sam to my mother and to everybody else in the community, really. But he was always much more than that. He supported me in a way through my entire life. I went to school in the South, and on my way, I would always drop by Jim and Gwen's home. And I would spend a night on my way to Carolinas, where I went to nursing school. Or I would spend a week. And it was always very enriching, and so much of you are expressing this, but he had a way of seeing you and being with you. He was all of these other wonderful things, this deep thinking, spiritual man. But when he was with you, he was truly present in a way that not many people know how to do. And as a young girl, as someone in college who it was just a huge impression on my life. Gwen's father was a reverend and married my parents in Edmeston. Jim married Paul and I 42 years ago. And I guess we're not alone. I think there's a lot of other people who he has blessed with blessing their unions. And we're forever grateful. He married our daughter as well. I always knew what a deep and amazing gift he was in my life, but when he called on me to come down and help hold vigil with his wife, Gwen, when she was terminally ill and under hospice care at home, I was just honored to be able to do that for them. And to see him walk through such a deeply painful journey into his grief in such a loving and compassionate way to her, to me, and to himself, because he knew this was now his next journey. And he was always able to put things in words long before he started his columns. And I think I could come up with a half a dozen sound bites that I carry with me that are wonderful reminders of the depth of his persona and spiritual nature. But Paul and I have been very blessed. Our kids have been very blessed, and I am so pleased to be in the company of others who've been blessed by him.
One day, sitting on Jim's porch, he had the better view across the street. He he had reached some milestone in the number of articles he had written. So we had sort of a exercise that we took part in, trying to figure out, okay, how many words is that? So there's a common length for the articles, and we knew the general number. Okay, so it came to a very large number. And then we were trying to figure out, well, if you stretched those words end to end, how long would that go? Well, we figured that the average word was about 5 letters long, and then we measured how long 5 letters would take up and added it all up. And then trying to quantify, well, okay, how long is that? And so let's see, well, could you circumnavigate the globe? Yes, you could. So, but at what latitude? Anyway, we figured it out that you would have to be in Reykjavik. So if you ever find yourself in Reykjavik and you think you can walk on water, you could trace Jim's entire columns in a circle around the globe.
I want to talk about gratitude. I left a bar having drunk half a beer, and instead of saying a traditional goodbye, I said, be gratitude. And the reason I said that is because for the last 2.5 years, I've been writing letters to Jim. First one, Dear Professor Atwell, for more than 50 years, you have been my standard of excellence in the classroom. You gave voice that I never heard before or since in poetry. Your classes were more like theatrical performances than lectures. There was one class in particular that I always remember. I was fresh out of high school, and some of the other students were returning from Vietnam. You read poems from the First World War. Before you finished, the veterans had tears in their eyes. After Ann Arundel Community College, I managed to attend Washington College for a Bachelor's of Arts and Towson University for a Master's in School Psychology. For 30 years, I've observed teaching in other classrooms. There have been a few times when the teaching came close to what you did, but never near enough to equal what you did in the classroom. There is one regret that I have, and that is that I've waited so long to tell you how important you are to my life. I just finished a seminar in Wordsworth and Keats and made a point of thanking that teacher. I actually bought him a book on German Romanticism so he understood where the origins of Keats and Wordsworth came from. But anyway, he read poems and I may have understood better in his voice than in mine, but I speculate how they would have been in your voice. There have been times when I might have thought that following the advice of my 8th grade guidance counselor would have been better. There's nothing wrong with being a plumber, Harry. But I chose a life of the mind, in part because a guy from Glen Burnie, which is sometimes called the armpit of Maryland, heard something in a freshman English class that went beyond oakum and lead. I knew my grandfather and father worked with oakum and lead to weld together terracotta pipe. I may never have been a great student, as my grades could attest. It's just that as a student, I was inspired. For your part, I will always be thankful and hope in turn you've had as good a life as you contributed to mine. Now, I wrote that in December of 2022. And at my age, it's very hard to find heroes anymore that are older than me, because I'm 72. And I've tried to start finding heroes and be grateful for the young people that are struggling in the same way that maybe all of us have struggled at one time or another. So if Jim's dissertation was on rhetoric, which means persuasive speech, so if this letter and this meeting does anything to persuade anyone, I would hope that each of you don't tell anybody you do this, because you'll ventilate it. You'll leave the energy behind. But I hope that everybody goes to a young person, high school student, doesn't know if they're going to go to college or not, and do something about it. It didn't take me too long to write this letter, but I know a lot of kids that need this. And if you'd be willing to do that privately, silently, then Jim's life means so much more than just what those letters would mean. But they would be a contribution to continuing the way he's lived and the way I want to live until I'm 86. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So this may well be what's known as the Quaker lull, where at this point in time, friends have shared what's on their hearts, and we're all settling into the joy of all those messages. And we got more coming.
I would be remiss if I didn't speak up for this man who meant so much to me. I had the privilege of knowing Jimmy Sam for 43 years. I first met him when Rudy and I were on our way to South Carolina. He introduced me to pesto. I know it's a small thing, but it keeps on giving. And that's just the way Jimmy Sam was. I took a deep dive into my religion. I've done a lot of reading. He and I would have extensive discussions. So when he decided to embrace the Quaker faith, we were a little puzzled by that. We had known he'd been a Christian brother and a member of other churches. And he said, well, we asked, what is a Quaker meeting like? And he says, well, we sit in a circle, and when we're moved, we talk. And sometimes we leave without saying a thing, and other time, bedlam breaks out. He was a wonderful force in my life. He performed our wedding ceremony. He performed my daughter and son-in-law's wedding ceremony. So he was very much in our lives. And when he moved from Fly Creek to Cooperstown, his house had a nice little porch, and he invited me to come up and sit and enjoy his geezer hood. And in the short period of time that he had lived there, everyone who walked past that house said hello. He knew them by name. He knew something about everyone. That's just the kind of man he was. And like Barney, the purple dinosaur, said, sharing is caring. And Jim was very much of that nature. And I'm glad he shared so much with me. And this world would be a much better place if there were more people in it like him. Thank you.
I just want to add how enriched my life was that at summer barbecues with Jim showing up with a bushel of oysters where he and my mom would spend the entire day opening and festivities. We started talking about Gregorian chants, and he goes, well, you know, I taught them. And I said, really? Aren't they not very melodic? And he goes, well, I always thought they were wonderful. And he stood up and he just burst into a Gregorian chant. And coming from this little Baptist town of Edmeston, it was just a fun thing to do. And from that, we broke into a lot of other songs that we shan't share.
Thank you, Brent.
This is a prayer that Jim held very close to his heart for pretty much all his adult life. It might have been his very favorite. It's the prayer of St. Richard of Chichester. Jim visited the cathedral there and had almost one of his most deep spiritual moments at the statue of St. Richard's outside the cathedral. But here's the prayer. Thanks be to thee, my Lord Jesus Christ, for all the benefits thou hast given me, for all the pains and insults thou hast borne for me. O most merciful Redeemer, friend and brother, may I know thee more clearly, love thee more dearly, and follow thee more nearly, day by day. Amen.
So here we are in the lull. Swimming in the memories and the words and the joys of our dear friend Jim. Whether it's in a car or on the porch with a better view, or whether it's being in his presence one-on-one or sitting in meeting, Jim Atwell had a way of being in people's lives that all of us have been touched by, one way or another. And I'm going to share a little bit of a story, a couple of stories, because Jim and I got to be the bad kids together. We would hang out in yearly meeting, and I'm not exactly what one would call a good Quaker, because I get frustrated, and it takes me a while to settle into worship, and mostly I want to giggle a lot. So having Jim sit in the back row with me in meeting for business, which was a test to anybody's endurance, the two of us were so bad that they had to separate us sometimes. But that friendship, you know, that troublemaking became a friendship as always. And Quakers have a way of being with each other called eldership. So he, as a recorded minister, would often have someone accompany him on his pulpit visits. And there was 2 times, one for the yearly meeting when he gave the Bible half hours. And I had to behave myself sitting right down front in front of everybody, kind of like this. But every now and then he would say something during Bible study that would make you want to giggle. You know, it was not a serious thing that he ever did. And then another time I was given permission or invited to accompany him to Unadilla, where he did a lot of, he actually took over the pulpit there for many months. And he asked me to come with him, and it was at the point where his balance and his walking was beginning to get challenged. So rather than climb up to the pulpit, he asked them to bring down a chair down onto the floor where he could talk. Well, sure enough, it was a big old comfy chair, and didn't he just belong sitting in front of that congregation, sitting in a big old comfy chair? And giving forth as if he were just hanging out with his best friends or his family. I mean, short of a fireplace, you know, it was perfect. It was the perfect setting. And it was in that moment that I realized that, and he would probably kill me if I said this to him personally, because his humbleness was astounding. He simply was. He didn't think about it. He just was. And he believed in being present wherever he was. And it may be, as he thought, a God-given gift for him. But what I realized as I was sitting there as his elder was that I was sort of in the presence of the Fred Rogers of Quakerdom. Right? Right? Just right there, welcoming, asking all about who you are. Tell me who you are. And in your telling of who you are, you learned who he was. So we're really, really, really grateful that you're now all unofficial members of Quaker worship and have done a wonderful job. And I'm going to pass this back to Deb Dickinson, and thank you all for coming. There's one last thing that I would say, and that is that Jim is here among us all, right? Friends believe that there is that of God or the universe inside all of us. But I want you to know that he's here, and he's really, really glad you didn't tell some of those other stories.
And there's lots of folks far and wide who are able to join in because this has been live streamed, and it also will be available on YouTube afterwards for sharing. One of the couple who aren't here today, but who we had talked about getting ready for this, is a couple that I had lived with in a joint household years before I moved upstate New York to marry a farmer from Springfield Center. Anyway, Bob Lowhouse and Ann Wright are Quakers who are part of a community in near Baltimore, Sandy Spring. And Bob wrote some words to what he called, he didn't say ancient, but an old Scottish fiddler's tune. He and I drove up to where Quakers meet at the summertime, or we used to meet anyway, up at Lake George, a place called Silver Bay. And he would share with me the joy of different things that happened, one of which was being in men's worship sharing. And he was in a worship sharing group, various different spaces. They got crowded into an office where people were sitting on this and that. And anyway, when he could no longer travel up there, one of the nice things that they did in the group was they would connect with him by phone. And he was on the phone in the middle of the men's worship sharing group. And Bob Lowhouse is one of the people who was in that group. And I just thought, as a closing to our time together today, I would like to not only invite us all next door to continue with the sharing, to have some refreshments afterwards, but to ask Will Walker and Katie Boardman to play the words that he wrote to this old Scottish tune, which I think was written by someone who had lost his first wife in the early 1800s and then lost his second wife. And I'm not sure if there were adult children or not, but these two folks have agreed to share the song.
and it's here we must stay. But here in our hearts we will love you forever and be with you again in heaven, we pray. But here in our hearts we will love you.